December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
So, I'm going to present you with a theory. Japan attacking Pearl Harbor was one of the Empire's biggest mistakes during World War II and hindered their goals. And what was their goals? Well, the most basic answer was that it was to control resource-rich countries so that it never had to go through an economic depression again. Now, the other, more complicated answer was that they were looking to gain enough power to be able to maintain its autonomy against European powers. Now, that's a really complicated subject that I'll go over in the future. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So Pearl Harbor was technically a success. However, there were several reasons that it wasn't actually the resounding success that some history mediums make it seem. First off, what we need to discuss is why Pearl Harbor, as in why the attack. Well, with Japan currently engaged in the brutal Second Sino-Japanese War, the US had put an embargo on Japan, which cut off scrap metal, oil, zinc, and other important material. They did this partly because of the war crimes being committed in China. But also, and probably more this than anything else, Japan was threatening American interests in the region. The idea behind the attack was that if the Pacific Fleet was destroyed, it would delay the US long enough for Japan to conquer all of the Pacific. Once that happened, they would be able to form a defensive line with all the islands. And the death toll and economic toll would be so much that the US would back down. Now, the attack itself, or more the results, and why I say it wasn't that great of a success, well, let me see if I can put the strengths and losses for both sides on the screen. Also, feel free to pause to take a look at the figures. So yeah, it seems like a great success, except the waters in Battleship Row was shallow, and the damaged ships were able to be recovered and put back into service. Only the USS Utah and USS Arizona couldn't be fixed. That's only 2 out of 8 battleships. That's not that great. The carrier ships were also not there, which was a huge missed opportunity, and while carriers would be pretty important in the new naval doctrines. And something that I think gets overlooked a lot is the Japanese not attacking the dry docks and the fuel supplies. If they had, the US would have been forced to transport a lot of these ships to the mainland to be repaired, and the loss of the fuel supplies would have made it much harder for the Pacific Fleet to operate. Now, if you're thinking, well, maybe they should have just changed some of the targets and then it'd be more successful. Well, sure. But my argument was that they never should have attacked Pearl Harbor at all. You see, 1940, Japanese advance in China had pretty much ground to a halt, and resistance fighters were actually having a good bit of success. Of course, there's several reasons why this is, but I think it would be incredibly dishonest to say that the resource embargoes imposed by the United States weren't actually having a big impact on this war. They were. After all, Japan receives some 70 to 80% of its material needs from the United States and her territories. So Japan needs resources. The way to get them would be by way of the Southern Plan, which was laid out that they could escape the effects of the embargo by taking the resource-rich Dusty Tsinzis and Malay, as well as some other areas. Now, because of this would bring them into conflict with some other Western powers, namely Britain. And because Japan believed that the US and Britain's bond was so strong, well, this would bring them into armed conflict. I disagree. There was quite a bit of isolationist feelings in America at this time. In fact, most believed that the war in Europe was just an issue for the Europeans to figure out for themselves. Organizations like America First Committee printed out isolationist propaganda as well as on radio and even held large rallies over it. A popular radio priest named Father Charles Coughlin used his platform to push this very thing and was a part of the committee. Now, on top of this was Japanese propaganda. See, Japan had been attempting to sway American public opinion on its war with China all the way back into the 20s. That's 2 decades worth of propaganda. it was a pretty smart campaign too, with popular American phrases like manifest destiny, New Deal, and open door used frequently. These propaganda pieces laid out only Japan could fix the division in China and stop the spread of communism. This had mixed results, but it did give them the support of many business leaders at this time, and goods were actually still able to be sold in America. You can find out more about this in June Grasso's book, Japan's New Deal for China. Of course, that's just businesses and some of the public, and hardly proves my point, or well, theory. The real reason I believe attacking Pearl Harbor was a mistake that prevented them from accomplishing their goals is that they never had to go to war with the US, at least not for a while. A bit of positive public opinion and a few businesses couldn't stop war. But as I've already put out there, America was pretty isolationist in its view. In the mid-30s, Congress had actually passed the Neutrality Act. See, a lot of Americans felt incredibly dissatisfied with their involvement in World War I. Most Americans didn't even understand why or how they even benefited, and thus had no interest in any more conflicts overseas. Now, if you don't believe me, just listen to his public statement by Republican Senator Gerald Nye of North Dakota.
Americans want no more war. Most of all, they want no more participation in foreign wars. If another European war is to come, it is not going to be a simple matter for America to stay out of it. American commercial interests, selfish and greedy, sensing the opportunity for profit from war, would do as they have done in the past if left to pursue their own course. To prevent that pursuit of that course has been the purpose involved in the so-called neutrality legislation which has just passed Congress. This legislation is a compromise, but as such is a real forward step and constitutes real progress. Unless Americans awaken quickly to the danger confronting them, they will awaken one morning all too late to the fact that these American interests have led them into another war, into so-called paths of glory which prove actually in the end to be paths not of glory but paths of gore for the lone and sole purpose of serving these selfish commercial interests.
Senator Nye did vote for a declaration of war after the attack in Pearl Harbor. Now just think, Japan thought that they would inevitably have to go to war with the US because if they captured the European colonies in the Pacific, well, America would declare war because of its relationship with Britain. This is not really sensible. I mean, Germany declared war on Britain in 1939, and the US wasn't at war with Germany at this time. So that should have clued them in on how the United States would react. I mean, do we really think that the American Congress and the public would have approved of war for the Dutch Indies or Malay and China? I mean, China? Heck, America at this time didn't even have a good track record of how it treated its Chinese immigrants in its own country. Now, I believe with all of this evidence that if Japan had kept up its political talks with America, kept up its propaganda, and left the American territories alone and not attacked Pearl Harbor, the American Congress would have never approved a declaration of war with Japan. But these are all my opinions, and I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. Do you agree? Disagree? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to like the video, and I'll see you next time.
I just want to thank my patrons, Evangeline, Christian Sela, Helene Casado, and Mary Elaine. If you like my work and would like to support me, check out Japan at War on Patreon. Thank you so much, guys.